dispersed by the federal government. They followed that up with the CARES Act, which is to date the largest piece of legislation that Congress has passed in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Among other things, it included the creation of the Paycheck Protection Program, modifications and an expansion of the SBA's Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the creation of the Employee Retention Tax Credit, as well as a variety of other spending targeted at developing vaccines, expanding testing, providing additional aid to state and local governments, and expanding unemployment benefits. Congress passed a number of subsequent funding bills to replenish the Paycheck Protection Program, make modifications to the Paycheck Protection Program, but then didn't really do much beyond that until this past December, when they passed a $900 billion package, which was included in the annual appropriations bill. I will walk you through a lot of what was included in that package, as well as what was just passed a little over 2 weeks ago in the American Rescue Plan here in a second. Oops, there we go. But first, just generally, the American Rescue Plan, this was a $1.9 trillion package that is more than twice what Congress passed in December, but still a little less than what was passed a year ago in the $2.2 trillion CARES Act. It does a variety of things, which you can group into 4 categories. First, it turbocharges vaccine distribution. And as far as the business community is concerned, this is just as important as what the American Rescue Plan does as far as providing aid to businesses, because the sooner we get vaccines into people's arms, and the sooner we get this done as broadly and as widespread as possible, the sooner we can reopen the economy. Next, it provides significant resources to individuals. It does this in a variety of ways. First, it extends federal unemployment benefits until September 6th of this year, and it provides an additional $300 per week on top of what the state provides. It also provides for another round of direct payments to individuals. These checks are already on the way out the door. Many people have already received them. If you have not received yours, it will likely be deposited in your account shortly. But one thing to keep in mind about the $1,400 per person stimulus checks is that they completely phase out for individuals with incomes above $80,000 per year, and with households for households with incomes above $160,000 per year. That threshold was dropped from previous bills. There were a number of senators, actually on both sides of the aisle, who wanted to make that benefit a little more targeted. Lastly, as it relates to individuals, it expands and enhances the child tax credit. It increases the child tax credit to $3,000 per child. And for children under the age of 6, that actually increases that to $3,600 per child. Furthermore, families can claim the child tax credit on children as old as 17 now. Next, the next category of aid is directed at state and local governments, and this is one of the biggest chunks of the American Rescue Plan. In total, it's $350 billion directed at state and local governments. For the state of Oregon, it is estimated that you all are going to get just a little under $4.3 billion. This is total funding for the state of Oregon. So it includes not just what the state government will get, but also what county and city governments will get. I've included the main estimates for Lane County. Lane County is projected to get about 74.1 million, Eugene 35.6 million, Springfield 13.9 million, and Florence will likely get in the neighborhood of $1.87 million. There are very few restrictions being put on this funding. Congress stipulated in the legislation that this money cannot go to pension funds, and it cannot go to offset a tax cut. Otherwise, they pretty much made this a blank check so that states and localities can use this to in any way they deem appropriate to respond to the pandemic. So the one bit of advice we are giving state and local chambers is that you need to start talking to your policymakers, both at the state level and at the local level, about how you feel that they should be spending this money. Because again, as I said, there are very few restrictions being placed on this money. It really is being left up to state and local governments to decide how best to use this money to respond to the pandemic. But for our purposes today, I'm largely going to focus on the main programs that were set up to respond to the pandemic as it relates to businesses. And as I said, I'm going to talk a lot about what was passed in December, as well as what was passed 2 weeks ago in the American Rescue Plan, because there's a lot of interactions between the two pieces of legislation. And there are really four main programs that were set up to respond to the pandemic for small businesses. That's the Employee Retention Tax Credit, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and of course, the Paycheck Protection Program. So I'm going to start with the Employee Retention Tax Credit. Recall, this is a refundable tax credit that was set up originally by the CARES Act. It was a 50% tax credit on wages up to $10,000 per year per employee that businesses could claim if they had experienced at least a 50% drop in gross revenue. So in other words, this is a potential $5,000 per employee for eligible businesses for tax year 2020. In December, Congress made a number of significant changes to make this tax credit more generous and more flexible for businesses. First, under the original CARES Act, a business could not claim the Employee Retention Tax Credit and also receive a Paycheck Protection Program loan. They have gone back and retroactively stipulated that a business can now receive a PPP loan and also claim the Employee Retention Tax Credit. However, you cannot claim the Employee Retention Tax Credit on the same wages that you use your Paycheck Protection Program loan to pay for. So in other words, if in 2020 you received a Paycheck Protection Program loan and you use that loan to pay your wages in, let's just say, June and July, you cannot claim the Employee Retention Tax Credit on those wages. You can claim it on the wages you paid in August, September, October, November, and so on, but you cannot claim it on the wages you use that Paycheck Protection Program loan to pay in June and July. The point, their objective here is to prevent double dipping. So next, they also, for 2021, expanded the Employee Retention Tax Credit. They increased it from a 50% tax credit on wages up to $10,000 to 70% on wages up to $10,000. So in other words, it's a potential $7,000 per employee tax credit. Furthermore, they took it from being an annual tax credit and made it a quarterly tax credit for Q1 and Q2. So if a business if a business is claiming the Employee Retention Tax Credit in 2021, you can claim up to potentially $7,000 per employee for quarter one and quarter two. So that's potentially a $14,000 per employee tax credit. Furthermore, they lowered the eligibility threshold so that more businesses could qualify for the Employee Retention Tax Credit. Remember, under the original tax credit, you had to experience at least a 50% drop in gross revenues. Under the revisions made in December, a business only has to have experienced at least a 20% drop in gross revenues in that quarter compared to the same quarter in 2019. They've raised the employee cap so that businesses with 500 or fewer employees will now qualify so long as they've experienced that 20% drop in gross revenue. And as I said, already mentioned, you can receive both a PPP loan and claim the Employee Retention Tax Credit. You just can't use the Employee Retention Tax Credit or claim the Employee Retention Tax Credit on the same wages you used your PPP loan to pay for. There are a couple big changes that were made in the American Rescue Plan. They have retained all of the changes that they made um, in the December bill, but they have expanded it to the end of the year. So now, if you are a business with 500 or fewer employees and you have experienced a loss or a drop in gross revenues in a quarter compared to that same quarter in 2019, you can claim an employee retention tax credit of up to $7,000 per employee for each quarter that you have experienced that loss uh, through the end of the year. So that's potentially a $28,000 per employee tax credit, depending on what your losses look like in each quarter compared to 2019. Furthermore, they have expanded the eligibility for the employee retention tax credit to also include startups established after February 15th of 2020. But really the big change is that they have extended the employee retention tax credit to the end of the year. And again, it is a quarterly tax credit of up to $7,000 per employee per quarter. The next big program that was impacted by both pieces of legislation is the brand new Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program. This is a new grant program, a $15 billion grant program that was created in the December passed bill that is designed to assist live venues like movie theaters, concert venues, playhouses, museums, zoos, really the types of businesses that have been completely shut down during the course of the pandemic. The grant amount would be in the amount of 45% of 2019 gross revenue up to $10 million. And to be eligible, the shuttered venue must have experienced at least a 25% drop in gross revenues. The major change that was made to this grant program by the American Rescue Plan is that you can now receive both a PPP loan and a shuttered venue operator grant. But again, just like with the employee retention tax credit, you cannot use the shuttered venue operator grant for the same purposes that you obtained the Paycheck Protection Program loan for. Again, they want to avoid businesses double dipping. Now, this grant has not yet opened. However, last week, the SBA announced that on April 8th, the portal to submit applications will open. Furthermore, next Tuesday, March 30th, they will be hosting a webinar, and I'm going to put in the chat here. Hold on. So, oops, so I apologize. So I have put in the chat a link to the SBA registration page to register for a webinar that they are going to be hosting to walk potential applicants through what will be needed in order to apply for a shuttered venue operators grant. I encourage all of you to register to attend that webinar. We receive a lot of questions about what types of businesses could potentially qualify as a shuttered venue. And a lot of those questions will be answered on this webinar. Additionally, please start monitoring the website on the link I've provided on this slide. This is the portal to submit applications, and you can go and sign up to be alerted when they begin accepting applications. They have indicated that when they do begin accepting applications for the shuttered venue operator grant, that they are going to prioritize the hardest hit businesses first. And on their website, they have indicated that they are going to begin prioritizing businesses that have experienced a 90% or greater loss in gross revenues for the first 2 weeks. After those first 2 weeks, it drops to that they will prioritize businesses that have experienced a 75% or greater drop in gross revenues. And after 2 weeks after that, they will open it up to businesses who have experienced a 25% or greater drop in gross revenues. Again, they want to prioritize the hardest hit businesses first, and then they will gradually open it up to more broadly after that. The next program I want to discuss is the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. This is a brand new grant that was created by the American Rescue Plan. It is a $25 billion grant program. And in the legislative language, They walked through all of the types of businesses that would qualify for the grant. But when you look at the list, what they are trying to do is encompass any business whose primary purpose is to serve food and beverage. So in the bill, they specify restaurants, bars, food stands, food trucks, food carts, caterers, saloons, inns, taverns, lounges, brew pubs, tasting rooms, tap rooms. They went to great lengths to think of every type of business because they want to capture, again, every business whose primary purpose is to serve food and beverage. The grant amount will be the pandemic related revenue loss. So in essence, you subtract your 2020 revenue from your 2019 revenue, and the difference is the amount of the grant up to $10 million per entity or $5 million per location. The grant uses can be, or the grant can be used to pay for payroll, mortgage, rent, utilities, supplies, food and beverage expenses, paid sick leave, and operational expenses. The one restriction they have included, or I'm sorry, there's two restrictions that they have included for the restaurant revitalization fund. First, you cannot receive both a restaurant revitalization fund grant and a shuttered venue operators grant. Second, publicly traded companies are not eligible to receive restaurant revitalization fund grants. However, if you are a franchise of a restaurant revitalization fund or of a publicly traded company, you are eligible. So if you are a McDonald's franchise or a Taco Time franchise, you can be eligible, but the parent company itself cannot be eligible. At this point, we do not have much additional information on this grant. As I said, this is a brand new grant program that was created by the American Rescue Plan. However, we expect that in a lot of ways, it will be administered very similarly to the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. So hopefully it will be stood up and begin accepting applications a lot more quickly than the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant program has. But there are a couple of things that potential applicants can do now so that they're ready to apply when the portal opens. We do know that restaurants, once they apply, are going to need a DUNS number. So you can go to this website and apply for a DUNS number. And once you get that DUNS number, you will also need to register with sam.gov. This is the federal government's grant applicant website. So the two things you can do right now to get ready for when the SBA begins accepting applications for restaurant revitalization fund grants is get that DUNS number and get registered with sam.gov. The last thing I want to talk about is the Paycheck Protection Program. The American Rescue Plan really didn't do a lot with this program. Most of what was done with this program, most of the important changes to this program were made in the December bill. And that bill reopened and extended the Paycheck Protection Program until the end of this month. It also, for hard hit businesses that have already exhausted their first Paycheck Protection Program loan, and hard hit is defined as businesses that have seen a 25% or greater drop in gross revenues. It created the option for those businesses to apply for and receive a second PPP loan. It simplified the forgiveness process. In essence, they are creating a process that will essentially presume PPP loans of $150,000 or less automatically forgiven. However, keep in mind, businesses still have to fill out a simplified one-page document in order to get that forgiveness. But in essence, they're making it as easy as possible for these smaller dollar amount loans to be forgiven. They've expanded the list of eligible expenses. Under the original CARES Act, the eligible expenses in order to get loan forgiveness were payroll, rent, utilities, and mortgage interest. They've expanded that list to also include operations expenses, supplier costs, worker protection expenses, and covered property damage costs for businesses that were located in those cities where we saw social unrest and rioting last summer. But keep in mind, even though they have expanded the list of eligible expenses, they have retained that 60% rule, that 60% of Paycheck Protection Program loan proceeds must be dedicated to payroll in order to be eligible for loan forgiveness. Next, they made it very clear to the IRS that any amount of the loan that is forgiven should not be taxed. They have further made clear to the IRS that businesses should be permitted to deduct the expenses that they use their Paycheck Protection Program loan to pay for. Furthermore, they have, under the original CARES Act, if you received that emergency economic injury disaster loan grant of up to $10,000, that would reduce loan forgiveness under the PPP. That is no longer the case. The amount of that emergency grant no longer will reduce the amount of loan forgiveness you receive under the PPP. And then, of course, one of the biggest priorities for us and for, I know for the Florence Chamber, as well as all the chambers across the country, we wanted to expand eligibility to also include our local and state chamber partners. So they now include 501c6 nonprofits in the list of eligible nonprofits for PPP loans. As I said, very few changes were made by the American Rescue Plan, but they did expand eligibility to include more nonprofits. So up until the American Rescue Plan, 501c charitable 501c3 charitable nonprofits, 501c6 chambers of commerce, and 501c19 veterans organizations were the only 501c nonprofits eligible for PPP. The American Rescue Plan expanded that list to include more nonprofits under the 501c nonprofit designation. They've also provided some additional funding to shore up the Paycheck Protection Program. However, there is still a substantial amount of funding available. So at this point, there isn't much fear that the Paycheck Protection Program is going to run out of money anytime soon. I also will note, and this was not included in the American Rescue Plan, but just this week, actually just yesterday, Congress passed legislation to extend the deadline to apply for a Paycheck Protection Program loan. The new deadline will be May 31st. So in order to get a Paycheck Protection Program loan, you need to have that application submitted through your lender by the end of May. Applications that are received by that deadline, they have given the SBA an additional month to the end of June to get those applications processed so that there are no stragglers. Anything that's in the pipeline by the end of May should be able to be processed. But again, I want to emphasize that businesses should not wait. If you are a business that has not received a Paycheck Protection Program loan, and can benefit from that, or if you are a business that already received a Paycheck Protection Program loan and has exhausted that and would qualify for a second draw, go and talk to your lender as soon as possible so that you get that application in the pipeline and you don't run the risk of the Paycheck Protection Program loan program running out of money. As I said, there's still plenty of money in the program, and we really don't have any significant fears that it's going to run out of money. But if we've learned anything through this pandemic, it's to expect anything. So again, do not wait around. Get that application submitted through your lender. Now, I know this is a lot of information. We have provided and we have developed a number of guide documents for each of these programs that you can go to our website, uschamber.com/coronavirus and download. They walk you through the specifics of all of these programs, as well as a number of other guide documents related to reopening your business, the types of questions you should be asking as you reopen. There is some guidance on vaccines and what you can require of your employees. We have a number of other guide documents on things you can do to help encourage your employees to follow social distancing, wear masks, and what you can do to encourage them to get vaccinated. All of that information can be found on our website. But before we get to questions and answers, I just want to recap a couple of things on the employee retention tax credit. Again, they have made this as generous as possible for 2021. It is a quarterly tax credit for businesses of 500 or fewer employees who have experienced at least a 20% drop in gross revenues. It is up to $7,000 per employee per quarter. It is not something you go to SBA or to the SBA to apply for. It is a tax credit. So work with your accountant, work with whomever prepares your taxes in your payroll company to take advantage of this tax credit. Also, if you had a PPP loan last year, they did make it eligible. They did make businesses eligible to receive both a PPP loan and claim the employee retention tax credit for 2020. But remember, for 2020, it's an annual tax credit. But so again, talk to your accountant or whomever prepares your taxes on how you could potentially take advantage of the employee retention tax credit on your 2020 taxes. On the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program, that the application process opens on April 8th. Next Tuesday, SBA is holding a webinar to walk potential applicants through how to apply and what types of shuttered venues will qualify. Go to that link I put in the chat and register to attend that webinar. On the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, we are waiting for more information from SBA on when that process will begin to be stood up and when they will begin accepting applications. In the meantime, restaurants should make sure they have a DUNS number and register with sam.gov so that they have all the required numbers for when that application process opens. And then again, on the Paycheck Protection Program, they have extended the deadline to the end of May, but the sooner you get that process going, the sooner you talk to your lender, the better situated you will be to assure that you get a loan. So with that, I'm going to hand this back over to Bettina, and I'm happy to take any questions.
I think before we go to questions, we're going to have Mike from Oregon Pacific Bank talk to us a little bit about the forgiveness process and his experience with that coming from OPB, and then we'll open up for questions, and you, Chris and Mike, can answer them accordingly. So with that, Mike, take it away.
Thank you, Bettina, and thanks, Chris. That was a good program. You actually hit on a lot of the points that I thought would come up. The actual process for forgiveness that we're seeing, we are using an automated platform for the people who took out a PPP loan with us. And we send out the forgiveness form. They can fill it out online. It comes back to me. I review it, submit it to the SBA. The small or short form is a one-page form that asks them to state that what the condition of their company was, whether they had to cut employees and what the reason was. And then if they applied the monies in the 60% or more towards payroll, and then they basically attest to that form we sign, we approve, we send off to the SBA, and the turn time on approval has been under a week typically. So we're seeing a lot of approvals come back and a lot of forgiveness come back. The loans over 150 require a little bit more documentation, and typically it's your payroll information, your payroll for the covered period. The 24-week has been real popular. That way people can normally hit full forgiveness with just payroll information. That's what I have seen anyway. And with that submitted, they can show that the payroll was processed by a third-party payroll or bank statements, and it's uploaded. The bank will review it, whether their approval process is like ours. We have a third-party review it. It comes back to us for a second review, and then we send it to the SBA. So it works very, very well. And we've had great response with that. So our program has worked almost seamlessly. I'm not sure what other banks are doing. I know you have to work through your lender to get forgiveness. And I don't know if there is an issue with a lender not giving forgiveness, whether there's a way to contact the SBA. That was a question I had today, and I haven't found an answer for it yet. But whether there's an appeal process. However, yet the lender is the only one who can approve the forgiveness of the loan that you're with them. So that's pretty much what I have. My experience has been very good with the program. We continue to see SBA applications or the applications for the new PPP program or the extension, and they come in a little bit slower than they did the first time around, but we're still seeing them. I actually had somebody who qualified for it last year, but he didn't apply. He came back this year and applied for it, and went through his 8-week covered period and has applied and received approval for the second round within 8 weeks. So that one worked out well. I guess we can open it up to questions, Bettina.
Yeah, and Ron had a question, and I think that somebody else had a question earlier. Ron had two questions. One was to you, Chris, on the public company that's defined as by the SEC as far as public
You know,
company.
I would have to go back and look at the bill to see how they define it. This could very well be one of those things where they simply said publicly traded companies, and they're leaving it up to the SBA to determine how that's defined. You know, one of the things we've seen with all of these bills is Congress has left a lot of discretion to the agencies, but I'm not sure how they define it in the bill. I apologize.
And then Mike, Ron wanted to know, are you saying that PPP borrowers should not fill out a direct SBA form and then go to their bank to prevent filing two forms?
That's correct. I would have them go to the bank, seeing what the bank is using. Most lenders are using an automated portal to the SBA. And
Yeah.
it is it's a process that the SBA helped set up at the beginning of this in part of the approval process for the initial loan. It has worked very well for forgiveness. So work with their bank and hopefully they'll get the same process that we have.
Yeah, I'm hearing I called you the other day with a friend of mine had gotten one and she's having real trouble getting it forgiven. And they're coming after her. They want big payments.
Now they had 10 months after the cover period expired before the first payment was supposed to hit. So our borrowers aren't seeing a first payment requirement coming until July of this year
They're coming.
for the first one.
Yeah.
That was the way the law was, unless they took an 8-month or 8-week cover period.
I'm not sure.
But anyway, they should work with their lender and they should get it forgiven if the monies were used in the right way.
Definitely. And does anybody else have any questions? Chris, can you just explain on the employee retention funding? What do you have to do to qualify for that? My understanding, it's only if your employees were out sick, or is that correct?
Well, it's if you continue to pay your employees, irrespective of whether they provide services.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So I think you might be conflating two tax credits that they created. In that the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, they said that small businesses of a certain size had to pay sick leave, and then they had to pay family and medical leave for absences related to the pandemic, or to care for family members who are out because of the pandemic. And then they would reimburse through a refundable tax credit the expenses of providing that paid leave. That is separate from the employee retention tax credit. The employee retention tax credit was set up to offset the costs of continuing to pay your employees during the pandemic, even if they were not even providing services. So if you had employees who were, even they were just at home, but you continued to pay them, you could get this tax credit for continuing to pay those employees.
Up to $7,000.
Yeah. So for 2020, it's up to $5,000 per employee for the year. For 2021, they made it a quarterly tax credit, so long as you qualify as a business of 500 or fewer employees that's experienced a significant loss in that quarter compared to the same quarter in 2019. You can claim it for $7,000 per employee per quarter.
Gotcha.
I know it's a little confusing.
A question I have for Chris, have you heard anything on the state level, whether any of this is taxed at state levels, or was there any mandate?
So I do know that a lot of states have taken steps to make sure that loan forgiveness will not be taxed at the state level. Oregon, I know, was trying to go in the opposite direction, but it sounds like that the legislature may have backed away from trying to do that. But I have not heard of any other state that's tried to tax the loan forgiveness. What we've mostly heard is that states have gone in and amended their laws to make sure that loan forgiveness would not be taxed.
Also, Mike, you can I'm sure you get the blast, but we just had something in it yesterday about that, about what's coming down the state. And right now, I don't think that they're trying to tax they're still trying to tax the PPP loans, and they're also trying to tax the stimulus checks. So
I will, I will say just from, Congress has gone to great lengths to make sure that individuals as well as businesses for that matter, are not getting taxed for any of this. I mean, in the American Rescue Plan, one of the things they did was they stipulated that on the unemployment payments that in 2020, the first $10,200 of unemployment payments would be tax free. So it is interesting that Oregon is looking to go in an entirely different direction than even Congress on this. So
yeah, they've redirected funds that were supposed to go to businesses to back. It's been a little bit disappointing. So any other questions from anybody? We have recorded this, so I will make the recording available for you if you want to share it with your clients and any businesses that you think could benefit from this. I really appreciate you guys sharing your time, and Oregon Pacific Bank for sponsoring us. Mike, do you want to make your shameless plug?
Well, work with the bank that you're with, and we will help as best we can to get forgiveness for you. It's in the benefit of both parties to make everything come together as quickly as possible. It is an unusual time, and we have to go to great lengths to make things work for people, but it's worth it. Oh, the PPP program has been extremely busy, and it's been very successful in Florence. I could tell you I'm close to 300 total PPP loans that we've made through this office, and I know the bank has made more in other offices. So a lot of them in Florence are very small. Most of them fit within the short form forgiveness, and the people that use them the right way, and we hope everybody gets full forgiveness the way it was intended.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just as a heads up, the Oregon State Chamber is, I just came out of a Government Affairs Council meeting before I came into this meeting. I literally jumped off of it and to jump into this, and we are being represented, for businesses are being represented, although it doesn't seem to be doing a whole lot, but there are quite a few bills that came out that are dead now that were looking to be really bad for business. So there's some things that are looking better. So I try to keep you up to date with all of that juicy tidbits in the blast, and keep us all on the same page working together. So I did get an email back from Erin Reynolds at the city yesterday, because I reached out and said, what are we doing with $1.8 million? And she said, we haven't gotten it yet, and we'll find out when we get it. And so as soon as we know, I'll be sharing that information with everybody too. So have a great weekend, everybody. Be safe. God bless you, and appreciate your time and your support. And I'll follow up with the email with you with the link with this recording.
Great. Thanks, Bettina.
Have a great day. God bless
thanks,
everybody.
Bettina.
Bye.
Bye-bye.